Hi, I'm John Ficarra. Welcome to Ficarra Classic. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. I hope you're liking and subscribing. Today we have a special edition of the garage here at Wingnut Manor. We're doing a special project. Well, usually once a year I go cannonballing, and I've done it for the last 15 years or so. But I'm not cannonballing this year. I had to find something else to do. So I called some of my cannonball buddies, and we put together a little crew that we're calling Drive a Go-Go, and we're taking a trip in cars, 3,000 miles, but we're not going coast to coast. We're going to Alaska. Now, why drive to Alaska? Because we're gonna jump our cars off of a cliff. Yeah, you heard that right. We're gonna jump our cars off a cliff. Are we that bored? Apparently. There's a small town in Alaska called Glacier View, and for the past few years, they've been doing this ritual on the 4th of July, that instead of fireworks and all that, they were launching junk cars off a 300-foot cliff and watching them all crash below. The whole town would come out. So we thought we would join that action and drive our cars from here. We're gonna start in Reno, Nevada, and drive 3,000 miles all the way to Alaska for the 4th of July and jump our cars off a cliff. Now, I had to find a car to jump. It's always difficult, even back from my film car days, to watch a car get wrecked or destroyed, and it still is. And it's really kind of hard for me to get my head around jumping a car off a cliff. So I had to be logical about it. It's the 4th of July, so I couldn't take an American car. It wouldn't make sense to jump an American car off a cliff. The holiday is about our independence from Great Britain and British royalty, so I figured it had to be a British car. Lotus was out, MG's too small, I went through it all, and I figured out what I was gonna take. I'm gonna take a Jag. I'm gonna take a Jag and jump it off a cliff in Alaska. No, not this Jag. No, that Jag. Here we are with the car we're probably going to take off a cliff in Alaska if we can get it running. It's a 1974 Jaguar XJ6L, and it hasn't run, as far as we know, for about 12 years. Been sitting in a driveway somewhere in the middle of the valley in California. So in theory, there should be a Chevy 350 under here. Let me lift the hood mat and let's take a look. All right, there it is in all its glory. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this thing has hood pins on it. As you can see right there, we had a hard time getting it open. But now that we have, yeah, it's a peach. This is all the car. What do you think, Matt?
I don't know.
Oh, Matt's speechless. Look at this. Yeah, this is gonna make it all the way to Alaska for sure. Just like this. I think we could just start it up. You know, I'm sure that battery's good. There's a nice Ford part. So they were kind of predicting their takeover from Ford. And I don't think they knew anything about that in 74. But there's the Chevy 350. Here's the beautiful paintwork. It's actually in really nice shape, considering we got it for $1,200. This is something Matt discovered earlier. We went to look at the gas tank, and delicious. I think we can just put some fresh gas in there, and she will fire right up. Nope. Yeah, not bad. There's a little bit of rust here on the panels. That won't make any difference when it's sitting at the bottom of a ravine in Alaska. But it's not a bad looking car. I'm feeling kind of hesitant to take it off a cliff. It's already starting to grow on me, which is not right. Let's take a look inside. Let's see here. The interior is not bad. There we go. Look, you got rear switches and temperature controls. Nice seats. There's the front. Apparently, one of the owners redid the dashboard, which doesn't look bad, but the rest of it's heinous. There it is. Everybody gets their own ashtray. That's the 1970s. There's ashtray in every door. So everybody could get cancer and die. Then they could just melt this thing down and turn it into an iron lung that all 4 passengers could ride in. But the interior is not bad. It's got this lush headliner, that's really sweet, that matches the inserts in the seats. This was probably a very nice, luxurious car back in the day. Not anymore. What do you think, Matt?
Oh, it belongs at the bottom of a ravine.
So Matt's ready to drive 3,000 miles already, you can tell. All right, we'll get to cleaning it and see what happens. Cleaning is step 1 in a car resurrection program I developed while rescuing cars over the years and eventually perfected at my film car company. Now, first, there's no sense in working on a crusty old car. Clean everything well so you get rid of all the brown recluse spiders, rats' nests, and whatever else peed and died in the engine bay over the years. Don't be afraid to get in there. Just make sure you cover the carb. Remember, all this gets wet when you drive in the rain anyway, so it's just fine. When you're done, blow it off with an air hose to get all the water out of the nooks and crannies. It helps you identify leaks later if everything is nice and dry and clean. Get the battery out of there. See if it takes a charge, because you never know. I'm going to say this over and over again. Save your money and never replace a part until you know it's bad. Remember, we don't know anything about the state of this engine. I want to hear it run before we sink too much time and money into it. Next thing I do is remove any ancillary parts that I know that I won't be using or are just in the way. In this case, I'm going to take out the air conditioning because I'm not investing in getting that working ever again. I'm also taking off some of the horror show 1970s smog equipment and the 40 feet of rotten vacuum lines to help simplify the engine and make diagnosing and starting it a little easier. Finally, I hit everything with a dose of Gibbs and let that soak in. Now that will make getting things loose later so much easier. Now that everything is nice and clean and de-diseased and peed on, we can actually get in there and do a little bit of work. First thing I do, once everything is clean, is I pull all the spark plugs out. And the reason I do that is I want to see what condition they're in, and they were all fine. I don't put new spark plugs back in, because again, don't spend any money on it that you don't have to. But while the spark plugs are out, I put in a little Marvel mystery oil in each cylinder, just a little bit. Now the reason for that is, this engine's been sitting for 12 years. There is no oil left in there. There's no lubrication left in there. So it acts as a lubricant. And it gets in around the piston and into the rings. Now the rings are these little pieces of steel on the side of the pistons that create a seal between the piston and the wall of the cylinder. Now if there's no seal there, you get a lot of blow through and very low compression. So that gets in there and hopefully gets them a little bit of exercise. Then what we do is we move the engine around a few times to allow those pistons to slowly slide up and down the cylinder walls. There might be a little rust in there. We don't want a lot of metal on metal because that kind of ruins a motor, even if it's just a small block Chevy. So we move them up and down. We also allow the springs in the valve train to expand and contract a few times because they've been stuck in the same place for 12 years. Then we let it sit for a while. So it's sat overnight that way. Now we've got a little lubrication on the inside. We make sure the oil's full and the transmission is full. Don't change the oil, leave the oil in there, make sure it's full, make sure all the fluids are full, including in the radiator, because you don't want the water pump running while it's dry, because that could seize up and cause a whole lot of issues. A lot of those water pumps will come right back to life. So now, really all we have to worry about is 3 elements that cause a car to run: air, fuel, and fire. If an engine has all those things, it will run. It's basically a giant air pump. So we started by looking at the fuel system. We start with the dangerous part. Now, all the fuel lines in this thing are rotted and gone, so we replaced them all. It's only a couple bucks a foot. It's just nice and safe and make sure that's finished front to back. Even if this car is a complete wash, it keeps us from catching on fire, even though I do have a fire extinguisher at the ready. We started at the back, come back here, and these Jags have, as we saw earlier, these crazy fuel fillers, but one on both sides. It's a 2-tank system because British, I guess. And these were full of junk, so we've cleaned all these out. We got all that nasty stuff in there. It's still nasty, but it's clean. We flushed out the tanks. What came out of the tanks looked like this, and that's about as nasty as you get. You're always going to get crap coming out of the tanks. They rust and scale over time. Make sure those are flushed out. We flushed them out with some fresh gasoline. We had put the new fuel lines back here, the two tanks actually join in the center and then go up to the front. We blew all the hard lines out, and then we brought them all to the carburetor. Now I put this clear filter on here so we could see the quality of the fuel that was coming out. It's getting clearer and clearer. And while we were running this, we saw that the fuel pump was dead. And these fuel pumps, this is a great thing about small block Chevys. And one of the reasons they took out the Jaguar Straight 6 out of these cars was small block Chevys were easy to work on, they were plentiful, parts were cheap, and they weren't as confusing to some people as the Jaguar motor. So there's a lot of these conversions. I've actually owned a couple. I had my Jaguar XJS that I bought when I moved to California. Somebody dared me to see if I could smog it, which I did. And then I had the other one that I got from Top Gear USA when I worked on that Tanner Faust tried to destroy. But we ended up cannonballing that out. Both of them great. It's a good, solid power plant. And like I said, parts are cheap. So that fuel pump was 20 bucks. That's not a problem. I don't have an issue putting money into things I know have failed. That failed, 20 bucks, done. Now we've got fuel all the way to the carburetor. Now we're talking about air. So the fuel's good. Now we're looking at the air element. The carburetor, now we've cranked the engine with the ignition off to get some fuel pressure up to here to fill the bowls. And in here, there's a little squirters. You'll see when you hit you won't be able to see it on the camera, but when you do this, you should see little squirts of fuel going out to prime in there. And there wasn't any fuel squirting. We weren't getting anything. That carburetor was nasty. So we rebuilt the carburetor, $40. So we're 60 bucks into this so far. The air element should work fine. It's not tuned, but it should put out the right amount of air-fuel mixture to cause it to ignite. Now we talk about the fire. We've got an HEI distributor, which has the coil built into it. This is a little more modern than the older small block Chevys with a separate coil. So that's actually a really nice ignition system. We checked all the wires. They were actually out of order. Maybe the mice or the rats switched them at some point as a joke, but we got all those in the right place. I didn't check the timing. We're going to leave it where it is. It obviously ran before it was parked, ran when parked. And so we have that. There's a little gizmo here that's kind of fun and real old school. So this is just hooked up to one of the spark plug wires. And what it does is it flashes to show you that there is spark coming out. So if we have spark and we have fuel and we have the right air mixture, it should start. Everything's pretty much where it should be. Now, unlike other shows, I haven't started this ahead of time and warmed it up. We are literally starting and try doing it in one take. So we've got fuel, we've got air, we've got spark. Oh, by the way, that battery I pulled out that I said, hey, you know, don't buy a new battery if you don't have to. Guess what? This battery's from 2007, and it right back there, it says 2007. It holds a charge. We charged it for a day, and it actually held a charge, and we tested it, and it actually creates enough power that it's turning over the engine a little bit. So I think we can start it on a 15-year-old battery, and that's great because that saves us like 100, 150 bucks. Lastly, I got a remote starter on here. These are really handy to have. That way you don't have to go in the car and try to start and come back out. I can start it right here. We've hot wired it a little bit so the ignition's going through here just so we can pull that off and stop it whenever we need to. And finally, always have a fire extinguisher. So here we go. Everything is where it needs to be. Right, Matt?
Yep.
All right. Always have, if you got a friend, have them double check your work. So we are ready to start the Jag after 12 years sitting. Here we go. Holy crap! All right, I didn't expect it to work that well. These small block Chevys will run poorly, but they will run. They will run all day long. So we got some water squirting out here. Can you see that? We got a hole in that. That's all right. We can get that fixed. But everything else sounds good. Let's give it a little gas. Woo! Ah, squirt. right. I'm a little wet. Whoa, all right. That's fine. I mean, wow. It ran, a little bit of smoke. That's usually the Marvel oil burning off, but no fires. Everything seems to be holding intact. And it's hard to tell because there's a lot of wet stuff going on. So we're going to clean that off, fix that. We don't need these heater. These are the heater hoses. We're going to get rid of all that anyway. The heater core probably doesn't work anyway. So we're going to drive to Alaska with no heater and no air conditioning. So that's it. The Jag runs. So that's awesome. We are one step closer to driving this to Alaska for its ultimate demise. So we will continue shooting videos. We got about a month before we have to leave. We're going to leave on, I believe, June 28th and get up there by July 4th. And hopefully this old geezer will make it to 3,000 miles, but we'll make sure it does. Next things we got to do is check out the entire brake system. Now we got it running, we can make sure it stops. We can check the suspension. But otherwise, you know, if she rolls, she's rolling to Alaska. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We'll keep you on the journey. And when we do go to Alaska, we're going to bring you with us. We're going to film the whole thing until we see this beauty right off a cliff. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon.